Look at this family. They look Asian.
But we are not from Asia.
They are from Europe. So why do they look Asian? This is Greenland. The people living here are called
Inuit.
and they have a unique look because of snow. If you walk in it for a full day, it will reflect too much sun to your eyes and you will feel pain.
It's called snow blindness.
After thousands of years, their body started to change and evolve. The human body built a skin layer around their eyes to protect them from the sun. That's why they look Asian.
It's called human evolution.
And all of this I learned from the beautiful people of Greenland. That's 1 minute!
You don't have to live in Greenland to have these eyes. In fact, the epicanthic fold, which is what it's called, is the most common facial feature out there in the world, according to, well, basically demographics. If you look at Asia, it's popular all over. A neglected place is Europe, as he pointed out. There's a lot of people in Europe who have the epicanthic fold. And then there's Africa, where people have the epicanthic fold. The last place, well, the last two places is Australasia or Oceania, as some people call it. And then the Americas, where the natives have this type of feature. And of course, the people who are mixed with the natives also have this feature. This feature is the most populous eye shape and eye feature. This is not just some unique thing that happens when you have snow around you. It really happens all over the world. And it's probably to protect people's eyes from dust and sunlight and all other kinds of things. To say that it's a snow thing is completely incorrect. So why do we associate it with Asia? Well, for the longest time, the biggest way of getting a message across was television. And the biggest television providers were Americans. And so people around the world witnessed Americans basically create stereotypes which would be used the world over. A good example of this is the word Asian. The word Asian in Africa, Europe, and other places doesn't mean an East Asian. It means someone from Asia. But if you go to the Americas, for the most part, they use Asian to mean someone who looks like, who's got the epicanthic eye fold and is probably from East Asia or Southeast Asia.
Are these guys, would these be Jewish people here with the curls?
No, this is Asian.
How can you tell that these ones are Asian? Because of the eyes?
It's looking like Iraq, like Syrian. And today it's looking same. You can see Syrian have big beard, Iraq have big beard.
So like Near East Asia.
Yeah.
It's obvious that the so-called Negroid or Caucasoid face developed way later, probably very recently. But when it did develop, it took hold in some locations. And when it did develop and took hold, some people made it their job to make it the default human being. And we live with that today. But we can put it right because of several information that we have that shows that there is no default face that has anything to do with the Caucasoid or the Negroid face. The real default of the human being is the epicanthic eye fold face. There is obviously nothing wrong with the Caucasian face or the Negroid face. And now that we have that in our arsenal, we could probably use it to our advantage. But this is why it doesn't surprise me that in places like Europe, when they start to reconstruct statues or they start to reconstruct skulls of people who lived tens of thousands of years ago, they always come out looking nothing like the modern Caucasians. What would you expect? The human beings only looked like what they look like today very recently. Now, these reconstructions are very hard to trust because, like other scientists say, a lot of those reconstructions, as soon as we find new evidence, they change them. Like some of them, they'll give him like big lips, or they'll give him small lips, or give him a thick nose or a small nose. But then, as soon as we find more evidence, they have to revisit. If you looked at what they said Neanderthals looked like a long time ago versus what they look like now, you would be shocked. So I don't really trust reconstructions that much. But in those evidence of reconstructions, you keep seeing over and over again two things. So if you look at the evolution of human beings, we come from very hot climates, so our skins tend to be darker, and this is true. You can see it all over the world. Europeans used to be dark skin, Asians used to be dark skin, Africans dark skin, used to be dark skin. The Americans used to be dark skin. Some of these people still are dark skin, but every single person started with this skin color, and then gradually it changed due to the environment. The frizzy hair or the looser hair, again, also had to do with environment and stuff like that, and genetics, obviously. So why does this matter? Well, this is to put into perspective that evolution, the way it works and the way it has worked, is a very tricky thing, and trying to historically get back. Like, for example, if you look at the ancient Egyptians, you'll notice that here and there they have these epicantic eye folds. And if you notice, East Africans have them too. And you'll notice that if you do your history and whatever, when people say, oh, in movies, people are constructing certain characters wrong, it's like most of these movie characters are constructed wrong. You have no idea what a lot of people would have looked like in ancient times, especially if you consider the fact that even in Europe, you have people who have the epicantic eye fold. You had people not so far back who would have been very dark skinned. And so when you see movies about cavemen in America, those cavemen would have been basically what we call black people today. And even if you look in some parts of Europe, some of their paintings are painted really dark skin, which gives the impression that they were darker than we think they were at that time. And maybe in the Middle East, people were really dark. I mean, the assumption of skin color turning a different shade is actually very recent. And it's possible that what we call the Caucasian face might have started in the Middle East, or somewhere in East Africa. We don't know. It's possible. All we do know is that it's not as numerous as you would think if it were something that was just there. For example, if you think that this face is the default, the Caucasian face was the default of the people who left Africa 50,000 years ago, 60, whatever the year you think it is, and then populated the rest of the earth, you would expect then that if we go and check in places like the Americas, Asia, Australia, all these places, that the default that we will find is a Caucasian face, and we do not find that. That is not what we find. For the most part, we find the typical face that I just described. We find a sort of uniform face all over the world, and only later do we start to see this Caucasian style face. And the reason for it, obviously, and of course, we call it Caucasian. It's not a European face. Caucasian is not European. Do not get me wrong. I am not saying this face is stuck in one place. The Caucasian look is in India. This Caucasian face is in the Middle East. It's in East Africa, and it's in Europe. And because of recent times, it has reached the Americas and other parts of South Africa. It does not mean that this face is unique to one place. And of course, if it was unique to just Europe, then we could say, it started in Europe, but it's not unique to Europe. And there are people that we know didn't leave Europe to get to, like, for example, India. It's more likely that the face started somewhere in the Middle East and spread towards India and Asia, and Europe generally. So next time you see people trying to criticize a historically inaccurate movie, if they make a movie about human beings 10,000 BC or earlier, everybody should protest. I want to see the same energy that I saw with the Cleopatra documentary. Everyone should protest and say, we know that scientifically human beings would have looked more like this. I bet you they won't. I bet you even me saying it sounds frivolous. But for some reason, it was made very important when it had to do with black people in that Queen Cleopatra documentary.